definitely find their community and multiple communities, preferably, the online communities, the local entrepreneur or small business association groups, and then reach out to that entrepreneur you really admire and say, can I have a 30-minute coffee break and just have conversation, soak it all in.
This episode is sponsored by TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com. Be sure and check them out and be sure and use the promo code Gordon, Gordon, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. Over 15 years ago, when I started my private practice, I had to learn a lot, and most of it the hard way, and I don't think you need to do the same. Hi, I'm Gordon Brewer, a licensed psychotherapist, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. Join me in this journey of discovery as we have conversations with other leaders and professionals in both the mental and allied health fields. Join us as we explore both the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. Everyone, and welcome to the podcast. I'm Gordon Brewer, and this is episode number 355 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hope you're having a good week or weekend whenever you might be listening to this, and glad you're listening to the podcast. And if this is your first time listening in, hope you'll take time to follow us or subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. And also, if you haven't done that yet and you're a return listener, I'd love for you to do that as well. Looking forward to you hearing from my guest today, Tiffany Duffing. And in this particular episode, we dive into what she refers to as the gut-brain connection. And one of the things that we all kind of know about in our fields is that when people suffer with anxiety, they can also have physical symptoms with that. And a lot of that comes with symptoms in the gut. And I won't get too graphic here with that. But anyway, we all know clients that have experienced this. But we dive into this topic and also how Tiffany has built a niche around this particular area of concern for people. And so looking forward to you hearing from Tiffany in this particular episode. Real quickly before we get to that, though, one of the things that's coming up is the holiday season. We're already through Halloween as this episode is coming out. But one of the things I would invite you to do is go over and check out my friend Ashley's online store called Mental Health Wear TN. It's just mentalhealthweartn.com. And she is working hard behind the scenes, getting lots of new designs. Some of them are holiday themed, but also a lot of great designs around our professions. So if you're looking for the perfect LMFT t-shirt or LCSW t-shirt, they would make great gifts for your staff. And also, she can personalize those items so you can add people's names to them. So be sure and check it out, mentalhealthweartn.com. And if you'll use the promo code, just take 20, you can get 20% off your first order. So be sure and check it out, mentalhealthweartn.com. And also, before we get to my conversation with Tiffany, I'd love for you to hear from one of the members of the Psychcraft network, along with the sponsor of our podcast, TherapyNotes. You know, when starting a private practice as a therapist, counselor, or a life coach, things can feel a bit overwhelming. You're unsure where to start, what to focus on, or how to grow things. I've been in private practice now for over 18 years, and a lot has changed. I've helped countless clinicians avoid a lot of the common pitfalls and build successful practices that align with their values and lifestyle. My coaching and consulting services are all about giving you a focused plan, helping you set clear priorities, and understand exactly where to invest your time, energy, and money. We'll work on defining your niche and then how to market it, ensuring that you build a practice that's both impactful and enjoyable. I'll also teach you the business skills they don't cover in grad school, from financial planning to implementing systems that make your practice run smoothly, like a well-oiled machine. In addition, I can help you find ways to diversify your income streams and create financial stability for long-term growth. Whether you're just starting out or looking to take your practice to the next level, I'm here to guide you in every step of the way. Let's work together to turn your vision into a thriving, fulfilling reality. To apply and find out more, just go to practiceoftherapy.com/coaching and consulting. That's practiceoftherapy.com/coaching and consulting. And also you can book a free 15-minute discovery call with me to talk about your goals and vision. I look forward to hearing from you.
Hey there. I'm Chris McDonald, and if you don't know me yet, I'm host of the Holistic Counseling Podcast, which is for therapists who want to deepen their knowledge of holistic modalities and build their practice with confidence. The Holistic Counseling Podcast is proudly part of the Sightcraft Podcast Network, a network of podcasts focused on helping people live more meaningful and productive lives. Join me each week as we explore the best practices for integrating holistic approaches into therapy and delve into the many benefits. Whether you're looking for new techniques or seeking to deepen your own personal journey towards wellness, this podcast is the perfect companion for your holistic path. If you haven't listened yet, you can find it over at holisticcounselingpodcast.com and discover other resources, including products, books, and other trainings to help support you in your holistic journey.
Ready to upgrade your practice from a rusty bicycle to a shiny new sports car? Buckle up, because TherapyNotes is here to turbocharge your journey. It's the comprehensive practice management system you've been craving, equipped with everything you need to navigate patient records, schedule seamlessly, host remote sessions, craft detailed notes, and tackle insurance billing with ease. And guess what? It's your trusty sidekick, available whenever and wherever duty calls. Picture having more quality time with your clients, all thanks to this digital assistant that never clocks out. Here's the kicker. It's Gordon approved, so you can trust it's the real deal. Bid farewell to paperwork headaches and embrace a new era of efficiency and top-tier care. Ready to level up your private practice game? Swing by practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes and punch in promo code GORDON for 2 months on the house. Enjoy the show.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm so happy for you to get to know Tiffany Duffing. Welcome, Tiffany.
Thank you so much. Very happy to be here.
Yes, and we were chatting a little bit here before we started recording, and I think this is going to be a topic that's really interesting to folks. Number one, because of her niche. She specializes, and I'm going to let her tell the story more, but specializes in working with people with GI issues. And then also we're going to talk about things that she's learned along the way and having a successful group practice. But Tiffany, as I start with everyone, why don't you tell folks a little bit more about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed?
Happy to. So I decided to go into mental health after being in the military, and even serving as a military spouse, saw the impact and the potential of mental health and thought, okay, this is the way I'm going to be part of the solution, a solution. And along the way, it became more and more apparent that I love health psychology. I really enjoy treating clients from that holistic whole body experience where we recognize that all the systems are talking to each other, because that's what's happening. So it makes no sense to me, to just treat in a silo, and decided to learn more and train more in health psychology. And that's how I stumbled on gastropsych. And it was through collaboration and consultation with a colleague, actually. He was super pumped. He was loving doing the work and saying how effective the treatments were. And then he started teaching me a little bit more about like brain gut cognitive behavioral therapy and brain gut or like hypnotherapy for GI particularly. And at first I was a little cautious because I'm like, what's this clinical hypnosis stuff you're talking about? And then as I become much more aware of what the science, says and how helpful it was for his patients and then my patients, that kind of got us to a point where we were talking about, he knows that I want to be part of a solution. This is my business partner. And he was already part of the solution. And we thought, instead of just spinning our wheels and working with one patient at a time, let's build a practice. Let's, create something that's not there. There was no national-based practice for gut-brain therapies. They were just kind of in the isolated university hospital centers, et cetera. And so we launched GI Psychology, and now we recruit, train, and deliver gut-brain expert care.
Awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, you want to say maybe a little bit more about the specialty, because I think, as you were describing that, I thought about one particular client I've had in the past that, had a lot of trouble with anxiety, and it really kind of affected them at a gut level for, literally, I mean, in terms of just gastrointestinal problems along with their anxiety. And that's what came to mind for me. Am I in the right ballpark in just thinking about it in that way?
It can be the case, yes. So sometimes anxiety plays a bigger picture, and sometimes it's a much smaller picture. So there definitely can be GI disturbances that would fall into disorders of the gut-brain interaction without a prominent anxiety presentation. But oftentimes we do see anxiety layered in there in a variety of ways. I think of even myself. The moment I get excited or anxious, how do I know? My stomach tells me. And a lot of people can relate to that. But whether anxiety is there or not, these treatments are targeting the communication, the bidirectional communication between the brain and the gut. So especially for someone who's anxious, if, let's say, I don't know, ham and cheese sandwich. I hate to throw ham and cheese sandwiches under the bus, but it could happen where someone gets sick. They ate something bad. And now when they see a ham and cheese sandwich, they kind of go, ugh, right? They might even get nauseous. And they haven't actually eaten the ham and cheese sandwich, and yet their body responds in the same way because the body's learned and the brain has come up with this self-talk. And when we engage in those thoughts, that self-talk, it can send messages down to the gut, which can activate systems. Or similarly, the gut can activate systems and send up messages of like threat or fear to the brain.
Right. Yeah. What are some of the other typical kind of clients that you have in your niche?
And so it can be irritable bowel syndrome. IBS is one of the most common ones in the world, but also with our patient population. Can also be acid reflux, like a hypersensitivity to it. It can even be secondary effects to like Crohn's or colitis. It can be, sometimes it's a bit more vague and there's not necessarily a GI diagnosis, but it could be a 6-year-old who's missing a lot of school because of tummy upset. And so we can look to educate the patient, but also really importantly, educate and provide parent coaching to the parent of the child too.
Right. Well, it's a fascinating niche. And I think, just hearing your story of how you've just built a whole specialty around this, because I think you are the first one I've ever heard of this particular niche. And so you've grown and you've started a group practice. And I know we were chatting about, there are lots of things, lots of mistakes that I know I made along the way, and you've learned a lot. So what have you been learning so far about just running a practice and the whole business side of things?
Sure. Well, the thing that you just touched on that sticks out is finding what people need. Like we want to bring a service that has value. If you're going to go through all the trouble and labor of creating a business, it needs to be something that brings its weight to the community and the world, not just another replicated service. And so it happened to be with this one, when we looked at, okay, the evidence supports these treatments. There's various studies that show how many people have GI distress, but let's go with one of them. 40% of the population at some time or another will have a GI disturbance, like a disorder of the gut-brain interaction diagnosis. So that's a tremendous amount of people. Clearly there's a need. And then we weren't exactly sure at the beginning if we were the first ones. That was uncertain because we just weren't embedded in the community enough to be sure. But we knew that there wasn't enough because every time a new patient would come to my colleague, they'd say, I've been looking for this for so long, I didn't even know it existed. And so we had these 3 tenets, right? There's science to support it. There's a community need for it. And there wasn't enough service. And we thought, okay, this is how we're going to bring value to the community. So I think for anyone contemplating launching or scaling, a private practice, it's really digging into what do we bring? How are we unique? How are we going to maintain this highest level of professionalism and service delivery while also growing? And so the lesson definitely was, I guess, 3 things come to my mind as part of that. One, like allowing yourself to recognize that you don't know everything. And that's okay. It's actually an exciting thing. And instead of it feeling insecure and kind of discouraged, which don't get me wrong, I've had those times too, but kind of going, okay, if there's all this stuff I don't know, that means there's lots of opportunity to learn. And it's podcasts like this and, the numerous other resources on private practices or group practice. I leaned into those so heavily at the beginning to really just absorb it all.
Yes. What are some of the, I guess maybe one thing I'm curious about is what's the size of your practice now? And, I think everybody has to find their right size for the type of provider they want to be, but
I don't know what ours will be. Like we haven't found what our ideal will be yet. We're not quite there yet. Our focus from day one was to grow thoughtfully and intentionally. So even though there's this massive national need for our service, it was so much more important that we prepare the training materials, prepare the systems for our staff, our employees, our clinicians, and develop it as we go and only hire as the demand and our leadership bandwidth could allow. And so excuse me. So within the first year, we had 5 clinicians, and that was a really, steady start. And we had a big piece of our business model is that we don't just market to the patients, we market to interdisciplinary providers. Because if we want the world to know that these treatments exist, then that means making sure community, patients and family members know, but it also means providers that might provide a referral that they know about it too. And so that first year we had 29 referring partnerships with different providers. And then more recently we have 9 clinicians and 135 referral sources. So these are GIs, nutritionists, et cetera.
Right. Are you just concentrated in one geographic area, or are you kind of statewide, or how are you doing that?
Well, initially, we're based out of Virginia, and the DC, Maryland, Virginia area was where a bulk of our referrals were coming through. And our initial business plan was brick and mortar business right here in Virginia. And then guess what? COVID happened.
Right.
So the 5-year plan for a telehealth department became the immediate business model, and we pivoted and went virtual. And what we found was the patient population we're serving, they really benefit to a higher degree to having the convenience of services in their home. And so they were very receptive to us pivoting and going virtual. So although we started in Virginia, DC, Maryland area, now we're in I'm going to guess 30 states. It's chronically, changing. It might be 35 actually.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's still a strong cluster. I think 40% of our patients are in this area, but we're
Uh-huh.
beginning to spread as more providers and more patients find out about us, than word of mouth.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. That's great. So, in hiring people, I guess maybe you mentioned them having kind of the same vision, kind of the same thing. What would you say has been successful for you in figuring out which people to hire?
Definitely there's like the pre-launch about it, and then the in the moment, and then retention. And so, just the proactive advanced planning for it was making sure that our leadership, that we defined what is our mission, what are our organizational values. And because if we don't know what the values are, then how do we know who the ideal candidate is, or how can we
Right.
communicate it to them so that they can self-select that, yes, I can align with those values, or no, that's not mine. And so we needed to really define it pretty clearly. And then also being able to have really specific goals and accountability along the way of, okay, this is where we're at today. So, maybe our employee manual, just for example, is a few pages, but really it doesn't cover everything it needs to be. So here's our 90-day and 6-month and 1-year goal of how we want to develop it. So we were
Mm-hmm.
really intentional with itemizing the good enough for now, but
Mm-hmm.
still making ourselves grow and add to and get better along the way.
Right.
And
Yeah,
that include oh, sorry.
no, I was just going to say that's really some great foresight. I mean, just of thinking about it in that way.
Mm, yeah. And I mean, if I expected the business to be where it is today, 2 years ago, it probably would have felt like a gigantic lift and I might have ran the other way.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not reasonable to expect we're going to start off with perfection or such growth. We need to not to say we're perfect yet, because we're definitely not, but we've
Right.
learned a lot. And
Yeah.
so, reading the books, listening to the podcasts, and actually another proactive way that we prepared for the hiring was connecting to other like entrepreneurs and other experts in the realm in the area. And so Entrepreneurially DC is my home organization where I get a lot of coaching and mentorship, and you don't know what you don't know. I
Right.
find a lot of those in that organization.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a lot of the proactive. And then, the in the moment, we created systems. We created a ranking sheet of what are the things that matter during the organizational overview meeting, because we have a 4-part interview. And then we also do kind of a resume, a deep dive, kind of following the top grading model, although it's much more simplified than that book describes.
Mm-hmm.
We're not there yet, right? And then we also give them a candidate webpage where they can read about our organizational values, look at what their week might look like, look at some of our employee incentives and benefits, really allow them to experience how it's a mutual interview. And
Mm-hmm.
then, there's more to that, but I won't go too much in depth unless, it's
Right.
something you want me to talk about. And then we
Yeah.
have the retention. I think it's super important that our employees know we care about them as humans, several of them mothers with young kids. And we want them to know that, yes, like we have high professional standards and we're going to challenge them to learn and deliver expert care. But we know that they also have lives and interests outside of work. And I think they truly feel that. They truly know it, which gives them the space and the mental bandwidth to give it all when they're at work,
Right.
which is
Yeah.
huge to meeting the mission.
Yeah. 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 So it sounds like a really welcoming culture, and just really people it's I would guess people feel a part of it rather than just working for.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When they feel like they're part of that bigger vision, that when they recognize that they're changing this piece of healthcare, that's hugely satisfying. And if
Right.
that energizes them, they're on the right team. And so
Right.
we try to
Right.
talk about that and discuss it openly during the interview, because if it's not something that's important to them, it's learning and growing and really changing socially how this is offered to our country. If that doesn't drive them, it would be too overwhelming. They'd hit burnout pretty quickly, quite frankly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's, yeah, one of the things I've read and heard is that people really don't work for a paycheck. They work for a purpose and meaning in what they do.
Exactly.
Because you can find any job that'll give you a paycheck, but I think at least in our field especially, I think most people do what we do because we have some sort of sense of, I'll dare say, a higher calling to what we do. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you leave work, even if you've worked so hard and gave it everything you had, you're not empty when you leave. Perhaps you're full, which is really nice feeling.
Sure. So here to shift gears a little bit, Tiffany, what are some mistakes that you've learned from?
Where can I go get my list of them? Let's see. Some mistake. Oh, definitely. One of the biggest ones was thinking that I needed to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, we're fortunate where we have two co-founders and directors right now. And I recognize there's many businesses where it falls on one person. So we're already at an advantage in that way. And yet we were developing the systems, bringing on the right people, keeping the finances, staying ahead of all the clinical learning and teaching it, and so over the last 3 years, we've made it a progressive goal to get to where we can work on the business and less in the business, which, every entrepreneur coach says that's the goal.
Right.
And we're still a work in progress. So, but that was definitely a mistake, is I knew what needed to be done, and I knew where to find the answers, or how to find them at least. And so it was really challenging to then give it to someone else and trust that it was going to be done the way I would have wanted it done. And sometimes it's about recognizing it doesn't need to be done the way I would have done it. And that's okay. That's great too. So now we do have a great admin staff, a clinical support staff, and a wonderful operations lead that works with me on a regular basis. And I'm fortunate enough where I get to trust her. So delegating has become so much easier.
Yes. Yeah. And and I think that's a lesson that I have to remind myself all the time, is that the importance of outsourcing and delegating, because in reality, that is the only way you can scale, is by taking instead of doing it all, you divide and conquer. And that's the way that you scale. I mean, it's just absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, and I think, I think people understand, okay, I'm busy. Maybe if they're a solo practitioner, they think, oh, I've got too many clients now, and I need to have somebody to pass them on to, or have somebody join me in my practice, or that sort of thing. I think we understand that. But I think where we drop the ball is understanding that same concept on the administrative side.
Yes.
And like you said, Tiffany, you're exactly right. I think sometimes we're afraid of giving it to somebody else because we think they're not going to do it like I do it, which they won't, but also being able to accept the fact and understand that, number one, they're going to do it their way, but also their way of doing things might be much better than we think it is doing it ourselves.
Yes. Yeah, it's great to get multiple brains in on a project instead of just one or two.
Right.
Definitely has been one of the tremendous advantages of our journeys, being able to pull in so many different experts, or people really that are just willing to learn and grow. And so, been able to give more away. And
Right. So, another thing that I was just thinking about was the importance of getting mentors and coaches to help you along the way. You want to say a little bit about that?
Absolutely critical, right? Like that would be the header, the flashing words. I learned at the very beginning of so I'll back up a moment. I have no business training. I actually had never seen myself as an entrepreneur prior to 2000. And so it actually was pretty recent. I had no vision of that. And then I started talking to prior supervisors and mentors about their private practices and listening, as I said, to a lot of resources, reading it, and thinking to myself, maybe I can do this, maybe. And so I started to share the idea with other people who knew me and believed in me. And I noticed how they responded with like an obvious, of course you can do it. So in my mind, I was like, yeah, 20%, I probably can do this. I'm not sure. And they were so quick to respond with 100% confidence of course you can. So it was super critical that I shared this fantasy or dream with people that believed in me because they clearly saw my capability way before I saw it.
Right.
And
Right.
so that's obviously a big benefit, to see.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. And I think we can look at something so many times and just have blinders on to something that might be obvious to someone else. And so
Mhm.
being able to, in different ways of doing things, and that's just across the board. I mean, I'm not, it's kind of like proofreading your own writing, somebody else is going to catch stuff that you didn't. So, I mean,
Exactly.
yeah, right,
Exactly.
right. Yeah.
And we don't
Well,
need to be experts of everything, right?
right,
If
right.
anything, our only expertise really needs to be to know who to go to,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, I don't actually need to be smart, but being smart means asking someone else who knows how to do it.
Right,
And
right,
that I think is actually the definition of smart, knowing where to find it.
right, right. I totally agree. Tell folks more about how they can find you and get in touch if they'd like to.
Sure, of course. So the easiest way is by going to gipsychology.com. We have, for anyone who's trying to understand or beginning to learn about the brain gut connection, we have a great resources page with some expert videos, explanations, scientific articles, etc. But we
Mm-hmm.
also have the opportunity where visitors can sign up for the newsletter. And then we publish it maybe once every 4 to 6 weeks, but we try to emphasize here's a group that we have coming out, or here's a new scientific study and here's how it relates to the work we're offering. So try to really hone in on what does our audience need as we try to build awareness for these effective treatments. So they can
Yeah.
reach us there.
Okay. Tiffany, any parting thoughts for folks?
Definitely find their community and multiple communities, preferably, the online communities, the local entrepreneur or small business association groups, and then reach out to that entrepreneur you really admire and say, can I have a 30-minute coffee break and just have conversation, soak it all in.
Awesome. It was great to have you, and hopefully we'll be having another conversation here soon. Well, a big thanks to Tiffany for joining me on the podcast. And I hope that gave you some good insight and just thinking about kind of the purpose of your practice, not only in thinking about a niche, but also building a culture within your practice that helps people feel like they are have a purpose in what they do. And I think that is so important. I remember reading something one time about why people work, and why they work is not because of the money, it's because of the impact they feel like they are making in the world. And I think Tiffany has definitely built a culture around that with her practice. So be sure and check out Tiffany's things. We've got links here in the show notes and the show summaries we already mentioned. And I think she's got some really good insight into things with this. I hope you will join us in the future episodes. Got a lot of great guests coming up. And as I mentioned earlier here at the beginning, be sure and check out mentalhealthweartn.com and check out all the new designs that Ashley's getting up there and getting some gift ideas for maybe your staff or those people that are important to you in your life, just around the mental health field. And check it out, mentalhealthweartn.com, and you can use that promo code TAKE20 and get 20% off your first order. Also, big thanks to TherapyNotes for sponsoring the podcast. They are the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers. They're who I use in my practice, and I'm always impressed with all the constant improvements they're making and just ways in which they're making their platform even better all the time. Their support is second to none, and I absolutely could not run my practice without them. So be sure to check them out by going to practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. And you can use that promo code Gordon, Gordon, and try them out for 2 months for free. So be sure and check it out. Well, take care, folks, and looking forward to being back with you next week for another episode of the Practice of Therapy podcast. You've been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. You can find out more about the other great podcasts in the network by visiting psychcraftnetwork.com. And if you haven't done so already, please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com and get your free private practice startup guide, along with a lot of other great resources and webinars and free things just by visiting. Also, be sure to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts. This podcast is intended to be educational in purpose and is not intended to give legal, accounting, or counseling advice. If you need a professional, find the right person for that.